Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me for another live stream with Compassion Coaching. My name is Jessica. I'm a relationship coach and self-love mentor, and I am really happy to bring you content this week and every week completely for free here on Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and YouTube. So if you're here watching my content, it means you probably have heard of me or you follow me. I post content daily throughout the week, 4 or 5 times a week, where I give tips, reminders, and suggestions for ways to build constructive, healthy, happy relationships and to develop your self-love and your perspective of yourself with authenticity, with respect, and with kindness, and how you can translate that into a relationship and develop your personal relationships and your romantic relationships through using those tools and those tips. So this week, I've been posting a lot of content that has been centered specifically around what we talked about in last week's live stream, which last week we focused on constructive versus destructive conflict. So last week's video will break down for you everything about what it looks like to constructively have conflict with someone or argue, let's say, or disagree with someone, versus how to destructively, which is a more common form of arguing, what that destructive argument looks like, which last week we went over. That includes raising voices, interrupting, cutting each other off. That includes acts of, let's say, intensity, such as throwing things, slamming a door, punching a wall, and things like name-calling or guilt-blaming or shaming words, statements, and phrases. So that's what I would say, societally or generally speaking, conventionally think of when we think of arguments and conflict, and especially in a relationship. Now we contrast that with constructive argument or constructive conflict or disagreement, which involves pausing and listening to your partner talk. So listening to the other person without cutting them off or interrupting them, hearing them. It also involves using respectful language, respectful tones, respectful ways of communicating, and keeping a respectful tone as well and level of your volume of voice. And it involves different things along the form of coming from your self-awareness and asking your partner, so how can we grow from this? What can we do better moving forward? And also saying, how can this bring us closer as a couple? So those are the 2 things we covered last week. Now, in the same subject and in that same spirit, this week I want to talk about the ways that those forms of conflict come out in our lives when we're in a relationship or even when we're interacting with other people on a daily basis. So I focus specifically on romantic relationships because I love love. But when you're interacting with friendships or coworkers or bosses or supervisors, you're still going to have dynamics that come into play. And I want to focus this week's live stream on how to let other people or how to let people around you bring out the best in you. So this week I want to focus on when you're in that moment. So I'll use references to romantic relationships. But remember, this expands to any type of relationship. This can be boss-supervisor, sister, brother, cousin, friends, parents. How do you let other people bring out the best in you when you're in a moment of difficulty or conflict and you can start to feel some of those resentments and those negativities and maybe, let's say, like those old conflict patterns coming back up or rising? So what do you do in those moments? Because you are triggered, something happens. Now, in a romantic relationship, let's give the example of if you and a partner are living together. If you're at a stage in your relationship where you're living with another person, or you've made the choice to live with another person, for example, there are so many easy points at which you can become triggered by small things, big things. And part of what I wanted to talk about is that when you are younger and you're being raised by your caregivers, a lot of the times you'll be in a home. You may have siblings. Anyone who has siblings, I have 3. Shout out to my incredible siblings. So we were a family of 4 kids, and oh my goodness, all the praises to my mom and my dad for raising 4 kids. But if you were in a family home or any sort of caregiver situation, then you had interactions with your caregivers and you had interactions with, let's say, your siblings. And you'll know, and if you have a best friend too, you'll know that those people that know you the closest and that you're the most open and vulnerable with are the people who know you best, who are often, let's say, people you live with or best friends, and they know how to trigger you like that so easily. And the same applies to with relationships and in partnerships. When you're open and emotionally vulnerable with someone, that does give that other person the potential to know you very well and inherently to be able to trigger you very easily. That's just part of what comes with intimacy. So part of intimacy and getting to know someone is knowing their strengths and their weaknesses. So when it comes to conflict, the very important thing to remember is that the people that we do let in are usually the people who can most easily hurt us, insult us, or accidentally hurt our feelings or trigger us. So I say this because if you've had siblings, then you'll know that when you fight with a sibling, they just know how to cut to the core and twist the knife. Like, they're so good at it because they'll say that one thing that they know you cry over at night, or that they know you've been self-conscious about or you've been hurting about. And that's one example, right? And we can think of, I'm sure, many memories of looking back at it now. We can laugh and we can be fond, like, of us too, where you're like, yeah, I just said that to irritate you, or yeah, I just said that because I knew it was going to offend you, to your siblings, so, or to your caregivers or people that you grew up with. And so when, for example, we translate that into a partnership, you'll know as well, or you'll notice as well, that that person that you're being vulnerable with has a lot of capacity to be able to, at times intentionally, at times unintentionally, throw out that hurt, or throw out that shade, or just react, in the moment and not think and process first. So how to let other people bring out the best in you so that you're not reverting to those old patterns or to those ways of, let's say, defense, offense, or twisting the knife, like I like to say when I think about, with my siblings, or ways that we used to get into disagreements or fight. There are ways to allow those moments to bring out actually the best in you. And when it comes to bringing out the best in yourself and in your partner, or whoever you end up living with, or dating, or exploring life with, then the first thing that I recommend is to embrace the conflict. Because when you embrace conflict in a relationship and you allow yourself to open up, you are enabling that person to be able to bring out the best in you. So instead of focusing on the negativity that's being generated, or the things that you don't like or you're not comfortable with, it's just about embracing the fact that life is discomfort in various moments. So life is a sequence of comfortable and uncomfortable or less comfortable moments, and it rides through. So as we can get through those high peaks, we can also get through the low points of, I'm not feeling comfortable right now, I'm not feeling my best, I'm not feeling super great. And like I said, if you're in cohabitation or in relationship with someone that you have an established mutual agreement that you are going to commit yourself, let's say as partners, to growing together, to evolving together, and to strengthening your relationship together, once you have that mutual agreement already established from the earlier stages of your relationship, then you will be able to take those moments of conflict and capitalize on that and use that to expel you forward, or to push you forward, to propel yourself forward, instead of having those be setbacks. So every obstacle you overcome, or every challenge you overcome, will then bring you closer and will help unify you in a way that otherwise it would just pull you apart or drive a rift between yourself and that other person. So again, if you think back to, let's say, your earlier days, if you lived with different siblings or with parental figures or guardians, think about ways that you were used to when you were younger, as ways of how did you engage in conflict, what were your general ways of engaging in conflict, and how did you mend those relationships after the conflict was over? And did you mend those relationships? Maybe there are still some situations where there are wounds that are still open, and there are relationships that have not been mended with either a parent or with a sibling or someone who's estranged that you now no longer talk to. So the ways that you have those relationships when you're younger or when you're growing up, those are the ways that we establish our patterns of how we engage with conflict, how we think of conflict, and how we react in those moments of conflict. So if you were always, or had a characteristic of always being maybe, let's say, a little bit more quick to anger, or more hot-headed, or more like quick with your words, tongue-in-cheek, then that's the way that you'll most likely be when you have conflict in a relationship. If you would become very quiet and silent and completely shut down in those moments where you felt attacked, or you felt hurt, or you felt vulnerable, then that's very likely how you'll be in conflict in your partnership, in your relationships. So take a flashback moment, go back to those original moments where you first became aware of disagreements or of arguments, and reflect on what that looked like for you, and think about what that looks like for you now in the present. So using your past to connect to your present, a lot of the times there are patterns that we establish, and there are ties that are connected directly or indirectly. And again, the way that you have relationships with your primary caregivers, and even with like best friends and people that you care about, those all merge with each other as to how you relate to people presently and how you relate to yourself even. Because a lot of our self-talk, the ways that we think about and talk about and to ourselves and about ourselves, a lot of that comes from things we got used to hearing growing up, or things that we got really used to thinking, or things we would hear all the time, and they just became so subconscious and so integrated as to, yeah, that's the way, that's the way it is, or that's the way everyone thinks, isn't it? So I encourage you now to use those tactics to let people bring out the best in you. Reflect on your conflict styles in the past and the present. Take a look at that video that I recorded last week about constructive versus destructive conflict, and about the posts that I've been putting for identifying tips as to whether you're in a constructive argument or a destructive argument, how you can flag those things and notice which is which. And use that self-reflection and that internal moment of self-reflection to start to allow people to bring out the best in you, because you don't have to repeat your past behaviors or your past patterns perpetually for forever. You don't have to. So it's all about a choice. And I encourage you to take those moments and start to deconstruct what you want your 2021 to look like. So right now we're in January, the beginning of the new year. So let's use that moment and that energy to capitalize on, how can I move forward instead of staying stuck in the past while we're reflecting on it and thinking about the painful points or the negative points, taking that and being able to use that to propel yourself forward in your relationships too. So it's not about reliving past episodes or reliving past hurts. It's just about using that to see where you're at right now in your life, where you're at in your relationships, where you want to be, and using those things to be able to embrace conflict in a relationship and to be able to open up and allow other people to really bring out the best in you, so that you can bring out the best in yourself, you can continue to show up every day, and you can continue to shine. Because that's really what it's all about. Life is about living it for happiness and for love and for joy. And that's why we do relationships too. Relationships, romantic partnerships, at the end of the day, they are always a choice. And don't feel like you're ever stuck in one, or like you have to do it, or like you have to be with a partner. Because once you're choosing that and you're choosing to be with that person, then you will be able to allow that to bring out the best in you too, because you know it's a choice. And when you wake up every day choosing to live the life that you're living, then that brings fulfillment and that brings joy. So I hope this is helpful. And thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for your time. If you need to reach out to me, you can go to jessicaashleysteele.com. That's my website, www.jessicaashleysteele.com. Check out my other content or my YouTube channel, also at Jessica Ashley Steele. Or just keep on watching me on Instagram and Facebook Live, where I post all my free content, and I post my tips weekly on suggestions and on ideas. So I look forward to coming back next week. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Stay safe and stay well and stay healthy. Bye, everyone.